All right. So what we are going to go through today is what typically takes most schools or colleges or whatever an entire semester to go on through. So we're going to be condensing this a lot. But essentially, we're going to go through some of the major theorists, psychological theorists out there, and how that plays into you. So the first two that we're going to be addressing are not directly, they are theories, but they're not developmental theorists. So the first one you should recognize because it is the latent version of what the wellness pentagram, which I discussed with you, is now. So now they have 8 dimensions of wellness. So you still see the emotional, social, spiritual, physical, and they change mental to intellectual. But they also include environmental, financial, and occupational. The reason that I do not consider those when I'm addressing you is those are outside factors. So the social is how you conduct yourself with others. Environmental is what is all outside. It's like the place that you are, the things in that environment, things not of you. Financial is very not of you. In fact, financial is more of a mind state than anything else. Like, if financial is what's your worth is a better way of putting it. And what's interesting is with the birth of Bitcoin and Dogecoin and all those other types of currency, we are looking at them and these things they're not real. Like, the only reason that Dogecoin was ever a thing is because a bunch of people said, let's make up a currency and then people could buy it. Funny dog coin. So financial is not something that really dictates you. It's an external thing that shows how much you're worth as opposed to what you are really worth. And then the occupational is just something that you can do. And unfortunately, occupational does not typically relate to the 5 areas, although it should. If teachers and government and society were doing this correctly, we would be measuring each person for their individual worth and then setting them up with an occupation that they are good at or have aptitudes for. So this is made by the Center of Psychiatric Rehabilitation. They came up with these areas of wellness. Next, we're going to talk about Ivan Pavlov's classical operant conditioning. So most of you, if you have not heard this before, is the most recognized is dog saliva. So what happened was this guy named Pavlov took this dog and he'd give him a treat, and every time he give him a treat, he'd ding a little bell. And so he did this over months, and he recognized that if you take the treat away and make the ding, the dog would start to salivate. So let's try a little experiment. Some of you might remember this, some of you might not. All eyes on me.
All eyes on you.
That is operant conditioning. I brainwashed you to do that. Right. So it's very useful for teachers when they're trying to get attention or trying to focus and things like that. But Pavlov figured out that you could associate different things with different things, and it would make this happen psychologically in their brain as a response. If you've ever watched The Office, every time Jim did this to Dwight one time, where every time he turned off his computer, he'd give him a junior mint or
that L something starts with an A. The little red pin mints.
Altoids?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, it was an Altoid, or yes. So every time he turned off the computer, he'd give him an Altoid. And then after a while, he just turned off the computer and he watched, and he puts out his hand. He's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I don't know." He's like, "Why does my mouth taste so bad?" And that's basically, he Pavloved Dwight.
We were talking about that in psychology, this exact thing.
Sure.
About how you can manipulate, like, people can manipulate your mind into, like, doing things on time and like that.
Right. And that's why this is so important to know, because it's operant conditioning. Something is happening outside of you to behave a different way. So to talk and if this makes anybody feel uncomfortable, please tell me this is not okay. Okay. In younger people, there are some, in abuse situations, there's a lot of times where the dad will not pay attention to the kid, or they will physically abuse them by hitting them or whatnot. And the child grows up thinking that this is a healthy relationship. Ladies, we're getting into that point where, like, we're going to be talking about your boyfriends. So the father figures, and this is another theorist that we're going to be talking about in a little bit, believe that we have something that more recently is called daddy issues. But the idea is that for some operant conditioning, what Pavlov was talking about, you are striving to achieve a care by somebody who treated you inappropriately or unhealthily. So instead of looking for people that treat you well, you're always looking for those people that don't treat you well, and you're doing everything that you can to make them love you. Right. But this is something that you really should consider, because this is happening around you, not only by loved ones, but by society, by social media, by TikTok, by all these things that are constantly showing you how to act and what to think. So that's Pavlov and his dog experiments. So operant conditioning. Disclaimer. These developmentalists that we're going to be discussing all have theories. The reason that they're considered theories is it doesn't work the same for everybody. A lot of these things are still apparent, but a lot of them are not considered. In fact, a lot of schools don't teach this anymore because they say that this doesn't talk for everybody. But what's funny is that most schools today are like, we need to be able to talk about everybody, but to talk about everybody, you need to understand that everybody is different, so that some of these will work and some don't. So to dispel these is to dispel a certain category of people. So all these different theorists are very controversial in today's education, particularly if you're becoming a teacher. But these are super important for you to understand, because they make you a good teacher, because you might see this in some students, but not in others. I have an extensive background in child psychology. So Piaget had the stages of cognitive development. So he broke it up into 4 different areas. He had the sensory motor, the pre-operational, the concrete operational, and the formal operational. So he's talking about, okay, if I touch this, this is what this feels like, this is what it smells like, all the senses. So after you sense these things, then you can start talking about the things. That's the pre-operational. So if you see water, you know that water can be cool or warm. It's got a liquid form to it. It feels a certain way. Sometimes it smells a certain way. It tastes a certain way, yada, yada, yada. So if you're pre-operational, that means you've sensed it. You've experienced it to some sense. The concrete operational is looking at different ways. Why is this water orange and this water is clear? Well, that must have Gatorade in it, or some kind of flavoring or something like that. Or it's straight up rust and I don't want to drink that. So you start doing these comparisons. You start categorizing and separating. And then the formal operation is looking at it in a metaphorical or aesthetic means. So Is this glass half full or half empty? What is water wet? Things like that. We're not going to get into that, but that's what Piaget
Water
does.
is not wet though.
So Piaget looks at 4 different levels of operation. Erickson, which a lot of people use, breaks them up into 8 different stages. So he looks at these as areas in your life where you experience choices. And if you don't understand the choice, or maybe don't choose correctly, or don't see both sides of it, you cannot move on. And this one is still a very practical working theory. So I'm going to go through these real quick. If you want to read through them, you can, but I'm going to go with the basic conflicts and then the key questions to be answered. So from a baby, you're learning trust and mistrust. This is mommy. I know I can trust mommy. So I'm going to hold mommy. But if this stranger picks me up, I'm going to freak out and I'm going to want to go to mom because I don't trust this. So I haven't seen my nephew for a couple of weeks. And when I went and visited him, I walked into the house, I had my mask on and I had my hat on. And he looked at me and he's like, who is this guy? Why is he here? And he was not, he was not okay. But after I pulled my mask down, took off the hat and did my, you get these rituals when you see them and you call them little pet names and things like that. After that, he's like, oh, this is a guy I can trust. So they're negotiating what trust and mistrust is and what that means. If this person hurts me, I'm not going to like them. If this person doesn't talk to me right, I'm not going to like them. So they're negotiating, and it's very primal. It's like if you see a new kid come to this school and you look at them and you automatically, and I know some of you get this, you're like, do I like this person or I don't like this person? So it's very rudimentary. It comes from this infancy. Once you answer those things, then you can move on to the early childhood, or the autonomy versus shame and doubt. Here's the thing that most teachers and society don't recognize. Shame is a good thing. Yes, it can be overwhelming and too much of it is a bad thing, but shame is a good thing. For example, nope, I'm not going to use that. If a teacher gives you I'm going to use it anyways. If a teacher gives you a bad grade, you should feel shame for what you did, because ultimately you either didn't do the project, you didn't listen, you didn't do it right, something along those lines. So having internal shame, you have 2 choices. You can accept that, learn from it, and move. And the next time that situation comes on, you do better. Or you ignore it and you repeat the same mistakes. I think I mentioned to you guys before, I have a friend who literally has some brain damage where he does not remember negative situations at all in his life, which is a cause of trauma. But now he repeats the same mistakes and he's in and out of jail. He becomes this drunkard every once in a while. Like, he has not had good life situations because he has not learned the shame. So autonomy also means that you can function on your own. You can make these choices without having to have shame. If I punch a student, I'm going to lose my job and probably go to jail, prison. And so I can figure out myself, that's probably not a good choice. Nobody had to tell me that ever. I just always knew. So that's the autonomy versus shame. And this comes from that stove is orange. That stove is black. I should not touch the orange stove. I can touch the black stove. It's hot, like a coil, the orange coil or orange flame. So after you figure out those things, then you can get initiative and guilt. So initiative is, I'm going to take action for this thing that happened to me. Like, I'm going to fix this the next time. I'm going to do more and do better. As opposed to guilt, which is, oh, it's their fault. They're the reason that this happened. It's too much. I can't face it. So you ignore it. So you either blame or you ignore. That's the guilt. And that keeps you locked into that situation. So am I good or bad is the question that it's asking. So the next time is industry or versus inferiority. I can handle this versus that's too much. This is too hard. So can you do it is ultimately what it's asking. If you have industry, you're going to figure out how to do it. If you have inferiority, that person's better than me. Like, I can't do as good. I can't do this right. Next is identity versus role confusion. Who am I versus who could I be, or what am I? And particularly middle schoolers and high schoolers, this is a big thing because you guys are in the age where you're trying to figure out your lives. You're trying to figure out who I am. You're trying to break away from the parents, like our conversation the other day. Like, your parents hopefully and ultimately want the best for you, but it might not be your way. And you're trying to gain that trust and that independence and things like that. But you also want to, like, you're still their kid. So you're trying to figure out who you are and how to govern this world by yourself. But if you ultimately are not allowed to do that or are forced into being somebody who you're not, then you're stuck in that situation. You're trying to figure out, and this has a lot to do with stereotypes. So what is considered like a jock, or what's considered a nerd, or I want to be part of this friends group, or I want to be part of that friends group. So you're constantly trying to negotiate, do I fit in here, or do I fit in here, and who am I? And this is why I have you do those rhizomes every stinking class, because I want you guys to figure out who you are. Because by the time you graduate from here, you're going to have to ask yourself that question. And if you haven't been exercised in this, you're going to get out there and you're
going to be scared.
You're going to be scared. You're going to be confused. You're going to make terrible life mistakes. Intimacy versus isolation. Who loves me? Who doesn't love me? Why? I'm talking about this as you guys. This is what you were talking about before. Nobody. Like, intimacy is this person I care about and they care about me, and I can drop my guard. I can be real with them. For example, dating. Nah. So I'm going to use a little bit higher level dating, not higher level, but more out of high school dating. So typically, we're going to talk in stereotypes again. Typically, you go out to dinner and a movie and things like that. And then you try to behave all nice and you're trying to put on your best foot forward and yada, yada, yada. And you're trying to be what the other person wants you to be. Yeah. And then you everything works out great for the first couple of weeks. And then you start dropping your guard and you start becoming who you really are. And unfortunately, people don't recognize this for years, and they get married and then they realize they're dating somebody that they didn't even know. Yes, this happens often, actually, unfortunately. And this is why people don't have good relationships. They don't talk and they live a fake life. So intimacy is dropping your guard, being able to, in its crudeness manner, being able to belch, fart, and pee in front of somebody that you love. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. Like, I can be who I truly am in front of this person and they love me regardless. That's intimacy. Like, I will love you no matter what. Even if you got terribly burnt and scarred, or you lost a limb or something, or you're brain dead, I still love you. So that's intimacy versus isolation. Isolation is the opposite. Like, I've been hurt too many times, I'm not going to try again. Or there's so many, only looking at the bad qualities of a person, like, just stop trying. So that happens quite often. I'd argue that I'm somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. So the next is generativity and stagnation. So at some point, and this is usually what they term as midlife crisis, Generativity means that you're still producing. You're able to find new and exciting things and try new things and find ways to sustain your life and be happy.
Yeah.
This is what happy is, being generative.
Yeah.
Whereas stagnation is, I'm going to the same job every day. I don't try to do anything new. I don't try to do anything exciting. I don't travel. I just sit on the couch and play video games all day. And then it's no wonder that now more than ever, we have more problems with depression, anxiety, and things like that, because most people are stuck in stagnation instead of generativity. So last one is ego identity and despair. So this is when, and they say it's 65 to death, it can come earlier. All of these, again, generalities of age. These can start way earlier, way later, depending on who you are. So the ego identity versus despair is like, have I been living my life correctly? Did I make bad choices? What am I going to do for the rest of my life? Am I scared of death, or am I okay with dying? Did I accomplish the things that I want to? Things like that. So basically, once you've made all these choices and you look back on your life, was this the life that I was supposed to lead? Or did I screw it all up? Or did I not accomplish the things that I want? So those are Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. Do more, do better.